Is it David?
David.
David. And convince him that you can go on YouTube and pretty soon and look up Penny University, and then it will start listing
Right.
various guests that you have been
Mm-hmm.
filming,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Cool. Except for
Yeah. Shakespeare.
Michael Warren, who didn't want to be on YouTube. He didn't like the idea of being on YouTube. Pardon me?
Nothing.
So today's guest, as promised, is Kathy Bisbee. This is Kathy here. She is currently the Executive Director of Community Media Access Partnership thing happening in southern Santa Clara County, San Benito County. It's all about community television. Her unusual past consists of many years with Cruz in its very earliest history, which she promised not to reveal any bad secrets about. No, I'm just kidding. She went from SCAN, one of our most active political groups, but I should tell you this, by total coincidence, last week's speaker Glenn Schaller, this week's speaker Kathy Bisbee, and next week's speaker John Leopold, our supervisor, were once upon a time all directors of SCAN. And I've known them all for years, but I never associated them all with SCAN. None of them are going to talk about SCAN. But anyway, so Kathy's going to talk about community television, and she's also a filmmaker, and there's cards here talking all about the film that she had in this year's Santa Cruz Film Festival called Don't Cost Nothing to Dream, and it's a documentary about youth using music as an instrument of hope in Cuba, Nicaragua, the USA, and Guatemala. It's one hell of a film, and if you get a chance to see it, do so by all means. So I told her today to start off by trying to educate us on what community television is all about, what it has been about, and what it's going to be about. And also, she knows a lot of and is not going to be representing the Santa Cruz community television channels, but she knows a lot about them, and they're in a hell of a lot of trouble. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And so, Kathy Bisbee, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bruce, for inviting me and for having me here, and thank you to all of you who showed up to listen. I hope that I have something interesting to say that will be compelling to you.
Could you clarify, are you from community television down the street?
I am not. I am not a representative. I worked there in the past, and I'm now the executive director of CMAP in Gilroy and in San Benito County. We have a collaboration with Santa Cruz and CTV, so I've been working with them for the last year, 2 years almost, to try to move forward our whole collaborative of regional media centers in Northern California to a new place.
I'm sorry, what is
Oh yeah, I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. Yeah, and actually, if you don't mind holding questions until we get to that part, that would be helpful for me. But I want to make sure you remember them because I definitely want to make sure I can answer all your questions. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about my background. I actually grew up on a farm in northwestern Maine, in a town of 400 people. And when you drove to my town, you couldn't get anywhere else. You basically stopped right there, and you could only hike to Canada. And I think for me that's pretty relevant because when you grow up in a town of 400 people, your perspective of the world is really different than had you perhaps been a person of my generation growing up in Santa Cruz. I'm 43 years old. Oh, I've said it on YouTube now. I think I skew a little on the young side, but I'm in Generation X, and most people in my generation didn't grow up like I did. So, that experience really affected me a lot. The other thing that had a big influence on me was that my parents didn't have a television. We didn't have a television growing up, so it's kind of ironic that I ended up working in media. And I benefited from that by reading a lot of books. I read as many books as I could get my hands on. And I didn't think I was a sharp kid when I was growing up. I was really an experiential learner, kind of more hands-on, even though I like to read a lot. I didn't see myself as being super critical thinking or academic, and neither did my teachers, probably because I talked all the time and asked a lot of really curious questions in the classroom. And I got stuck in the vocational track when I was about in 8th grade, and there was one teacher, and there's a point to this story. Her name was Mrs. Perry, and when I was in 8th grade, she realized that I maybe had some potential that was untapped, or saw that maybe I had a creative side. And so she started giving me books every Friday afternoon and asking me to read them and give her some feedback on the books on Monday. So I would voraciously read these books and bring them back on Monday with my opinions. It's the first time in my life that anybody had asked me for my opinion, that my voice mattered, that what I had to say someone else cared about and wanted to hear. And I also grew up at a time where the role of women was really changing, and heard a lot from my mom that made me a little bit on the hypervigilant side, perhaps, about being a woman and being a leader. But it made me very strong. It made me stand up to the patriarchal culture that I grew up in, and it made me want to be a leader. It made me want to create change in the world, because I saw the way that women were treated. I saw the way my mom was treated. I saw the way other women in my culture were treated. And even though they were intelligent, they weren't making as much money as men, or they weren't being promoted into positions of power or authority, or even in a community level, they weren't being moved into those positions of leadership. So Mrs. Perry thankfully got me into the pre-college, the college prep group, and then also put me into an after-school filmmaking program. And I really believe that that was a pivotal moment in my life where I realized that my opinion mattered, that I was a creative person, that I was more intelligent than I thought I was, that I had sort of a higher level of thinking capacity that was available to me, and that I could do something really powerful with that voice, do something that would create change in the world. And so I feel like today my role as the executive director of a nonprofit that is all about creating community expression, free speech, providing a forum for community issues, and putting them both on the cable channels and online, I feel like I want to do the same thing that Mrs. Perry did with me, which is inspire people to want to make a difference through using media and their own creative self-expression to make a change in the world. So that's how I got involved in this work. It's kind of a long path to get to this place. For me, I came to California in the early 90s as a community organizer, just like our president. I love that being a community organizer now, I can say that and people know what that means because of President Obama. My mom was an English teacher and very involved in the community. My dad was a YMCA director, and I also got the benefit of going to, in New England, we have town hall meetings. And so I saw that civic engagement and that community involvement as extremely critical in the health of a vibrant democracy and transparent democracy. So I would go, and every year we would hear everybody in the town speak up in the school, in the auditorium, and say exactly what they thought. And that was a very powerful message as a young person, to really witness democracy in action. So I got to California and I did citizen or community organizing work for about 8 years. One of those things that I did was work for the Santa Cruz Action Network on local progressive issues with local candidates, some statewide issues. What year? Let's see, in 1996 to 98, I was doing that. Also worked for CalPIRG, the California Public Interest Research Groups, and worked for PIRG actually in 5 different states around the country on my way out here. I like to tell people, and this is a true story, when I drove into California, I had a $20 bill to my name. And I had no credit cards, because my dad still, I just actually taught him how to use an ATM last week. He called me on the phone. He's like, how do I do this? Why am I doing this? Dad, that's where the money is. Because that's the culture in Maine. It's a cash-based economy there, and people are trading, bartering for everything, which I love and I miss immensely. But came to California with really nothing, no savings in the bank, no family help, had many, many challenges to get out here. So really came from a class background that was very challenging to me as well. And was so amazed when I got here because people had a very different philosophy about the world in California. No matter what their politics were, we shared this sense of innovation, that anybody can come from any background and do something really amazing in the world. That doesn't happen in New England, even now. It's very difficult unless you've got old money and old family ties and constantly, you know, did you go to this school and that school? It's very much a culture of status quo in California.
California exception of it.
You know, California is an amazing place, and I feel very blessed that I was able to stay here because it, you know, it is a challenging place to afford to live in. So that's kind of just my background and what got me to this place. As Bruce mentioned, I am a documentary filmmaker. I actually got back into filmmaking when my dog passed away in 2000. I had been a broadcast media journalism student in college, and got back into it, creating a very sappy video about my dog, which I recommend doing. It's a wonderful healing process to go through. And got back involved with community television here in Santa Cruz. I actually became a member here, started creating videos, doing a lot around local politics and journalism, issues that I was concerned about and cared about. I had been to Cuba with Global Exchange in 2003 and really felt like certain ideals of the Cuban Revolution really appealed to me, and I was very incensed at the injustice of the American-U.S. war against Cuba and what that meant for the Cubans and the humanitarian issues and the political issues that were involved in that. So I decided to go back in 2007, where we spent 25 days in Latin America working on this film, and the result is a lot of these youth are facing very intense situations in their communities just for singing out about racism in their community, sexism in their community, poverty. They're being oppressed by all the governments involved, but also lots of challenges with drug use in Latin America as well with the youth. So that's about me. I'm the executive director at CMAP, Community Media Action Access Partnership, and you can see us at cmap.tv. We are a community television station in the traditional sense that we have 5 cable channels. We have a public access channel that any member of the public can come and put content on our channel. Any member of the community can give us a DVD that we then air to the rest of the community. We serve southern Santa Clara County and San Benito counties. Santa Clara County, mostly just Gilroy. And then San Benito County, the whole county, even out to the rural communities. Last year we taught in the youth programs that we run. We have 600 youth that we reached last year in 2 counties, in addition to the cable channels, operating the cable channels. And some of these youth were at a one-room schoolhouse in Pinoche Valley, which is about an hour east of Hollister. So Hollister is over an hour to get to from here, east, southeast, and then an hour out there, up on a plateau, actually, up in the desert, a one-room schoolhouse with K through 8th graders, and there were, I think, 12 or 14 kids that we worked with. And they had never had an experience of having a video camera. They can't afford a video camera. They don't have broadband internet access. They can't watch videos online. They don't have a library. The library in San Benito County is very much impacted there. San Benito County is the 5th most distressed county in the entire United States. A lot of people don't know that about San Benito County. In the months of November and December of 2010, they had over 4,000 foreclosures each month. Oh, God. And in a community of 35,000 people, having 8,000 people or 8,000 households affected by foreclosures was a very big challenge in that community. So one of the ways that we see our community media center, we like to see there's kind of traditional PEG, which is public educational and government access television. And I'll talk about that, and then I'll talk about sort of the model that we're following, the new model of community television. So in 1984, Congress passed the Cable Communications Act. And that really came out of an interest in making sure that the cable monopolies were not reducing the amount of local community-based programming, which it was. And so Congress was trying to balance that out. They were also trying to give something to the communities in terms of a give back for the cable companies taking the public right of way. So what the cable companies come in and they do is they dig up our streets and they move all the wires around, and sometimes they have to cause traffic burdens for our communities for months or years at a time in some cases. I live in Live Oak, and I know they were doing that in my neighborhood for almost a year. So what is the give back to the community? Because if we're having to deal with traffic hassles or they're using our public right of way, they should be paying something back for that. And so Congress mandated that in any community that wanted to, you would have to create a community television station that would then meet the needs of hyper-local community news and information, access to government meetings, access to a free speech forum, a way to communicate for the public on the cable channels, that the cable companies would have to provide that. And that they would have to provide a per subscriber fee. So for each cable subscriber, we pay a small fee that then goes directly to the municipalities, and in some cases, like ours, to the community media center, to the public, to the community television station. So it was great that they set that up, because otherwise we wouldn't have had community television at all. There was no mechanism to set up that funding. So the funding began to come in, and in states like Massachusetts in particular, you see like very high levels of funding. And you'll go to, I mean, they also have the culture of the town hall meeting, which is different than us, so there's just a sense of community engagement that's a little different than maybe outside of Santa Cruz communities in California. But they have, I mean, you'll go to one town, for example, Northampton, Massachusetts, and you go 15 minutes over to Amherst, and they both have community media centers, and they both have their own cable channel in a town of maybe 15 or 20,000 people. So we're very fortunate that Congress set this up and created this funding stream. The problem is the cable companies have decided they don't like having that obligation to local communities. And they've been working very hard for the last 10 years to minimize their obligation to our local communities. Even though in 2010, Comcast, they made $42 million in profit. So they're unhappy with paying the public back for using the public right-of-way. If I were a landlord and they were renting space in my building, they would be paying rent every month for that. They're lucky we don't charge them rent. But we're unlucky because they have a lot more money in their pockets than the local governments do. And local governments have lost this fight in hundreds of local communities nationwide.
Why? Yeah, right.
Because the cable companies have deep pockets. It's more complicated than that. Well, it's much more complicated than just that, but that is one factor. One factor is the cable companies have a lot of money and they have a lot of lawyers. And they have successfully been able to convince states, in 23 states across the country, they have successfully convinced state legislators that, hey, we won't raise the cable rates for your subscribers. We'll keep them nice and low. If you'll just, raise this obligation, this unbearable obligation that we have to give a small amount of money to cable centers, community media centers around the country, we'll keep the rates lower for subscribers, so therefore you can say that you're helping more people.
But what's the point of having cable if you can't get public access?
Absolutely. Boy, I
And
would
don't
love for you
they
to tell
see it
people
as
that all over.
positive? I'm thinking like YouTube has committed $100 million to produce shows for content.
I think the cable
Comcast and
companies,
others would see the community TV as a farm, or, source of new talent.
well, let me answer both of your questions. I wish everyone saw the way that you saw it, but I think that is not the case across the country. Many people have left cable altogether and gone to Dish, who does not have the same requirement. In many cases, the cable companies didn't build in our counties over there. The cable companies didn't build out the infrastructure fast enough. So Dish actually got more subscribers than the cable companies. Charter 2 years ago was in bankruptcy, which is our cable company over there.
And now Internet's taking over.
Well, I think that's a whole nother issue. I mean, I think the question
But it's
of,
happening.
why do people go to cable except for public access is that not everybody sees the value of public access. And I think that some of that is on us. And I'll talk about a little bit about that as it relates to how we have followed a different model for our community media center and kind of where we're going with that a little bit later. I think that the other problem is that in these 23 states across the nation, the cable companies have passed this legislation. They've been very successful doing it. And we fought them. In California in 2006, our colleagues all across the state were fighting this. This community was fighting this. Members of community television here in Santa Cruz were fighting this. We're going up to the State House and making the case. But the cable lobby had more money. They had more time to have meetings. You know, we make it to a lobby day a couple times a year, and they're going up there every day and walking those halls. And it is very unfortunate. And there are things that we can do about it, but it's definitely, we're stacked up against a very large machine.
As long as you brought up the lobbying situation, the regulatory situation in this Bisbee, I happen to be an expert at economic regulation and dealing from Washington DC agencies as well as state and local, interestingly enough. And living some years here in Santa Cruz, I am very disappointed at the failure of the city council and the county board, both. And when you say we, could you address that in your answer and response? I mean, some responsibility is the city management, the city council, and some is the state.
Well, actually,
board.
I wasn't talking about any municipalities at all. I'm saying we as a movement. So
Okay.
I'm actually on the National Board of Directors for the Alliance for Community Media, which is an organization that represents hundreds of community media centers all around the country. I'm going to be at the board meeting in a week, actually in Chicago. And I think that we have had a failure as a movement, as professionals who are in this field, who are trying to move forward an agenda which is to protect community television. There are ways that we've failed. There's also some really amazing work that's been done. And I think the work around DIVCO was amazing, but we failed. Ultimately, we failed.
Work around DIVCO.
So let me explain that further. I was just about to go into that. So DIVCO in 2006 was a piece of California legislation, the Digital Video Infrastructure Competition Act. And the result of it was that it took away the obligations from the cable companies to pay municipalities and community media centers to keep supporting community television the way that they had in the past. One of the problems in our community is that we lost an institutional network, which gave access to 26 different locations in our communities, providing them with internet, high-speed broadband connectivity, which means that now, because we have to rebuild this network, we're not able to negotiate locally with the cable companies. Everything goes to a state franchise agreement with the cable companies. We've lost that ability to negotiate with them and say, here's what's important for our community. Here's what you need to do to pay for that public right-of-way. That power was completely taken away from us in 2006.
Who
did that?
So that was a state piece of legislation that no longer requires cable companies to have to give funding to local communities at the level that they had in the past. It doesn't allow us to negotiate at the local level the way that we have been able to in the past. Sure.
Is there a congressional review that set up this process to come back and take a look at and see how it's working out?
Nothing at the congressional level. That's actually a different piece of legislation that we're working to pass currently. It's called the CAP Act, and it's HR 1796, and we've been lobbying on the Hill to try to get more members of Congress to sign on to that. It's been very, very partisan process going on in DC. When I was there in March, we met with our California legislators. Sam Farr has been a huge advocate for community media centers.
But not very effective.
And he did sign on to the bill. I think the challenge that we're facing, like I said, is that the cable lobby is going there every day and knocking on the doors of our Congress members. They told me when I came in March, they said, you know, they're here all the time. And they actually, I can't say who, but a couple members of our Bay Area community Congress people actually gave me some information about what the arguments were of the cable companies. And to state legislators across the nation, they're very compelling because they're they're doing it all based on competition, and Congress is very responsive to them. So I think, yeah, as a movement, it's been very difficult for us to move anything forward until we can get more people signed on. Honestly, we have to get Republicans signed on. And, it's not my favorite thing to do in the world, but I certainly understand their perspective and try to talk with them about our perspective, which is a very nonpartisan perspective, frankly. We need these services that public access and educational and government access provides. We in San Benito County and Gilroy aired 3,000 hours of government meetings. And my friends in Nicaragua are completely impressed. They said, gosh, that's amazing. You guys know what's going on in your government meetings. You can watch it on the internet now.
In your jammies.
In your jammies? Absolutely. But even now, as we're trying to fight this battle to get our funding levels back to pre-2006 levels, we are also fighting a new front, which is in Hawaii. I just heard this last week. In Hawaii, Time Warner is making an argument that the internet should not be funded with cable fees. That the internet should be considered a whole separate entity, even though the cable companies are selling their services bundled together with cable and internet. So in Burlington, Vermont, they were able to fight that same argument and they won. So we're hopeful that we can get some of their lawyers talking to each other in Hawaii and see what we can do to fight this issue, because they need to pay rent. I mean, I think of it like paying rent. If you're running a business and you're using somebody else's property to make money for your business, you ought to pay them rent, or you ought to pay them a fee for that. It's no different with our community. If the cable companies are using our roads, our streets, our public airwaves for their commercial benefit, they ought to be paying something back to our community. And we're fortunate because Congress set it up so that those funds could go to community media centers, to public access television, educational government television. But we have lost, just in the last 2 years in California, 50 PEG stations in California that have closed as a result of DivCut. PEG is public, educational, and government access television. So that has been very disconcerting. We have also been filing a petition to the FCC to try to get them to do something about these issues that are happening. One of the complaints is that AT&T puts us on an internet base. Does anybody have AT&T in the room? If you have AT&T cable, what they do is it's called Uverse is the product. And you have to click through to find your community, your city. So you're going through, if you're Visalia, you're really kind of going to take a long time to get to your community television station. And this is really a problem for us. It's the equivalent of being placed on, being placed from channel 25 out to channel 99, or having to scroll through a list to find your community media center is like Siberia. It's cable Siberia. They're putting us way out there, and people don't have the same kind of access to us, which is really a problem. So in my work on the Alliance for Community Media Board of Directors, and with that organization, we are trying to move forward this policy work, both on the state level and nationwide. Really, the issue is something we need to address at the national level in Congress. We hope the CAP Act can be that, but I think we still need to address comments to the FCC as well. And if you're interested, you can go to allcommunitymedia.org. That's the ACM's website. I would encourage you to become a member and support the work that we're doing to protect community media around the country. So the next thing I'll talk about, and then I want to definitely open it up to more questions because I know there are folks who have some, is that at CMAB we really don't see ourselves as a PEG. I mean, we are in a certain traditional sense because we have a public access channel, 2 educational channels, and 2 government channels. So we are a PEG. We are a traditional community television station in that way. But I think both myself and our board of directors many years ago realized that we were not going to be able to sustain ourselves on cable company fees alone. And this is what's happening across the country, is that many centers are closing because they are unable to sustain themselves. They are unable to continue providing the community with free access to video cameras and lighting and audio equipment, free access to training programs that help give people job skills, free trainings to youth because the funding is running out, because these cable fees are running out. And I think we really see ourselves at CMAP as a community media center, which is kind of the new model of public access television. A lot of times people, when they think about public access, they think of Wayne's World. You know, that Saturday Night Live, and there was a movie skit. Very funny, you know, two young men in their mom's basement producing a cable access show. But we want to move beyond Wayne's World. We want to keep doing that because that's what some people want to do, but we want to move beyond Wayne's World and help people see that community television is really meeting the media and technology needs of our community, not just providing public access television. We're really meeting the needs of our communities. So at CMAP, we recently changed our mission statement, and I have to always look at it because it's only about a month and a half new. And that is that CMAP facilitates community self-expression through media education, civic engagement, and public access to media and technology tools. So we're really seeing ourselves as not really about cable television. It's really wonderful that we have those cable channels and we can use those cable channels as part of the work that we do, but we're really seeing ourselves as facilitating a dialogue in the community, helping to talk about issues that the community's not talking about, having a forum to do that, making sure that there's transparency in local government, making sure that youth and adults have job training programs that will help them in a 21st century environment. And so a lot of the work that we've done in the last 4 years is to build that kind of media center. But we're really following a model. Grand Rapids Media Center in Grand Rapids, Michigan, they have an amazing community media center, but they've taken 30 years to develop this new model. They rent out a theater as part of the work that they do. They have a radio station. They have a TV station. They have an online citizen journalism website. They provide IT technology services and training to the community. And they have neighborhood news bureaus in different neighborhoods all around the city. So they are really a participatory form of media and civic engagement. And that's what we see ourselves moving towards. And we have to go after new funding. We're not going to be able to use the cable company funding. Probably it will go away entirely at some point. It may be 2 years, it may be 5 years, it may be 10, but it's going to go away. So we've got to figure out a way of paying our own way in the future. And I think that's going to be a difficult transition. I think that's one of the challenges that we've seen with Santa Cruz with community television, is that the funding has not yet been developed for being really sustainable for the long run. I think also that the community has to support the general direction of the community media center. I know for us, people are less interested in free speech in Gilroy and San Benito County. There are lots of people who are interested in those things, but people generally are very interested in what's happening with the youth. They want to know, how are we going to keep the young people out of gangs? How are we going to find alternative activities that are positive, that help the youth to develop skills and help them think about themselves going to college or considering opportunities for themselves in the future, and then finding them jobs. I think they really want people to see their community and us to come up with news and information that really represents that community, reflects who they feel they are as a community. And I think really at our heart and at our best, that's what we're doing in a community, as a community media center. Just a really quick synopsis about what's happening at community television. Some of you may be members and know about this. Community television back in April came to CMAP and asked if we would be interested in a merger with their organization.
I mean Santa Cruz Community.
Santa Cruz Community Television. So CTV, Santa Cruz Community Television, or Community Television of Santa Cruz County. Their leadership came to us, asked if we would be interested in a merger. Our board was willing to consider that. They had a vote of the membership to see if they could move forward. They have to have a vote of the membership to do that. They did not receive enough votes of the membership to move forward. They received about, I think it was 89 votes. They needed 150 to move forward. So at this point, they would have to have another vote. I think the county supervisors have asked them to do that. in order to try to move forward with the merger, because then we could really centralize some of the resources that we're able to share over the two organizations. Monterey is also interested, the public access station there is interested in joining us. We've worked, we built a collaborative media center alliance, if you will, about 3 years ago. And there's 7 media centers, CMAP in Gilroy, Santa Cruz, Monterey, Davis, San Francisco, Marin, and Humboldt. And we've all been working together. We meet regularly, we do phone calls. There's no leader. We just all kind of try to make it happen, which is challenging sometimes because we're all really busy, but we have really helped each other a lot because we can bounce ideas off one another. It really came from me being a brand new executive director and fairly new coming back into community media and saying, hey, how are you doing payroll? Hey, how are you guys, raising money? How are you doing video productions around football? How are you doing the big, music events that you do? And really having a conversation, all of us, about best practices in our industry. That sort of evolved into policy conversations, fundraising conversations, youth media, youth development programs, election coverage. How do you want to do election coverage this year? It's going to be a big one. How are you guys doing your technology around the live election coverage? Are you doing live stream out at a coffee shop? What products are you buying? All of that kind of thing. So we've been doing that, and we've actually written some grants together and have been able to get AmeriCorps from the AmeriCorps Vista program to come and work with our organizations. 3 of us have AmeriCorps, and we've been working together this year to try to share with each other and learn from each other. And I think that's an area where, even if there is no merger officially, we still want to really collaborate and work with our sister stations because we rely on each other very much. We learn from each other, even just as an executive director, to say like, oh my gosh, I have this one staff person, or oh my gosh, my board is driving me crazy, whatever it is, and our staff get together and complain about us too. Anything just to share that really challenging work that we're doing. And we all have amazing staff that are really doing a lot of great community service every day for very low wages. We pay them as much as we can, but to do the work that we're doing in the community, it costs money. And people haven't had to pay for our services. So there's, I think, going to be a transition where probably in community television here in Santa Cruz and at our station, we will have to start charging for some of the things that we are offering to the community for free currently. And that's going to be a tough transition. But I believe that this community, just like our community over there, believes in the value of what community television offers and believes that we want to move forward with kind of this next step of where community television is going, and that we really don't want to lose this asset to our community, this opportunity for free speech and community development and dialogue that we have here in this county and many other counties around the country. Yeah.
First of all, I'm annoyed that Channel 23, if you're familiar, now requires a piece of equipment from Comcast and related things. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but they dropped one of the 2 C-SPAN.
Oh,
Now
yeah.
they try to get more equipment and more per month.
Oh, wow.
I see that as just one indication of the failure of the California Public Utility Commission, if that's who oversees them, or whoever, and the county council, as I mentioned, and the county board and the city council. I've heard about the history of how community TV was designated to be provided by Comcast in particular. The 2 channels, but not the 3. I noticed I get the 3 channels elsewhere, but not the 3rd C-SPAN, for example. And in terms of support with community TV, I'm appalled that a place as progressive as Santa Cruz County and the city government and the state legislature didn't long ago designate about 5 or 7 channels and proper funding and other services. I'm reminded of the anecdote from E.B. White, the great essayist, who was shown television by David Sarnoff in 1938 in New York City. And Sarnoff says, we're going to put it in all of Manhattan and we're going to offer so on and so forth. And won't this be wonderful? You can have symphonies and you can, yes, have government information and so forth. And E.B. White hears the whole pitch and presentation and says, yes, this could be very interesting. People could watch all these things, etc. And have the community be. And then White says, you know, if we're not careful, this thing you call television will become a waste of time. And he said that in 1938.
That's great.
Before
And
Walter
clearly-
Cronkite.
Now, my question to
Very
you,
good.
Ms.
Like
my question
Facebook.
to you, Ms. Bisbee, is, yeah, it could have been fantastic. You know, maybe the internet will be provided. I'm disappointed at the failure of leadership, but I do know how the bribery goes by the Comcast and
But
et
the
cetera.
question, Terry,
Redacted.
the
So I-
question.
I wonder if you're not just barking at the moon until you address and you get a recognition of the political corruption here. And
Well, let me
Okay, that's
just
what I'm
let me
stopping.
jump in because I want to address there is no agency at the state level where we can take our complaints to.
Here, here.
There is not. There is no agency at the state level that community television stations can go to and complain. We try with the PUC and then they tell us, well, here's how you ought to try to get a bill passed through the legislature.
then why doesn't somebody with some insight and wisdom on the state, the county board of supervisors, for example, say, we're going to designate that Santa Cruz County is going to set how this should go. And the cable company wants to do business in this county, they're going to provide
You know-
7 freaking channels free of charge. or something.
I'd be happy to, you should ask John Leopold that when he comes next
Exactly.
week. But, what I would say to that is I think we should be at least fighting for 3 channels because right now, those 3 channels might go away as well. And community television in Santa Cruz, as we know it, might go away entirely. So you should be raising your voice and asking your county supervisors to be willing to fight Comcast. I mean, they could make this. I mean, you should ask John what he has to say about this because there may be things I don't know about the relationship between the cable companies in Santa Cruz County because every county is different. So John's probably the best person to ask that question, not me. But what I would say as a resident of this county, just as a private citizen myself, is we should be willing in this county to make it a landmark case for the whole country. And I would testify in that case, and I would rally the troops nationwide to testify on that case because I think there is enough political will in this community to take something like that on. That is not true in every community. But I'm telling you, the cable companies are very powerful.
Malone.
What happens if, just as a protest, when we pay our cable bill, saying, if you discontinue these things, I will no longer be a customer? The only
Sure.
reason I'm here is because Dish TV does not offer this.
I think that's a good tactic. I mean, I think that you'd have to do it on a really broad
That
level.
basis, but
Yeah.
it's something that,
Yeah. As a community organizing tactic, I think it's a great approach. But you definitely want to get hundreds and thousands of people doing that because the cable companies need to think that there's something in it for them
yeah.
because they're not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. I mean, they really aren't. I don't think they would
Well,
argue
it's
that.
the reason for having it. I mean, they have to talk to, you, if you're not serving your customers, they go away.
But that goes to something you were saying earlier, that, yeah, you have to get hundreds of thousands of people to want to do that.
Yeah.
There may not be thousands of people that care that much about
That's
community
right.
TV to do that. They may say, I mean, I support it, I don't really watch it, but I support it.
Right.
And I'd be willing to support it even, but again, I pay taxes and I don't have kids that go to school. So you'd be hard pressed to find thousands of people that feel that way or convince them, much less that feel that way strongly enough to even want to do that. You might find half of them feel strongly about it, but not that strongly that they'd want to do what you want suggesting. And you're now saying we need to find thousands of people that feel that strongly about it that will do that and be hopeful enough and optimistic enough to even believe that it would do anything, unless you're a cynic like me that thinks even if you got thousands of people, you still couldn't do it.
But
Unless you
Well,
announce.
and it's a good point you raised because really hedging all our bets on television. I mean, how many of you think television is going to exist 10 years from now?
Not as we know it.
I mean, not as we know it, right? Not as we know it. So if we're building our whole case based on people having access to TV, I mean, just last year, only 1 out of every 10 people was dropping cable to watch television on the internet. This year, it's 3 people. What's it gonna be next year? 6 people, 7 people? So we're losing, the cable companies are actually losing subscribers, which is why they don't want us to count internet as part of the peg fees, because they know, it, just like we do, that people are going to watch community television online.
Could there be the TV equivalent of podcasting, where people just say, okay, I'll just do it out of my basement. You know, you can set up a little camera and, you know, not quite YouTube, but TV podcast. And some of these things go viral, and then they get picked up, and then it happens that way.
Well, mentioning YouTube, how can you address that as a force?
Great, thanks for bringing us back to that, because I know you brought it up earlier. You know, I think people always ask me, you know, what's the relevance of community television in a YouTube world? It's a good question. I'm not sure I can totally answer it. But what I would say in our community, in both Santa Cruz and in Gilroy and San Benito County, is that, you know, you try to find community news and information and community coverage of events on YouTube. There's not a lot of it. There is some, but you know, half the videos on YouTube are dogs licking peanut butter out of the top of their mouth, or like kids like falling, or you know, dumb, not really that intelligently created. I mean, they're just little short videos. It's not like people are spending time and thought in creating them, which is when you go through a class of community television, when you learn how to use the equipment, when you have access to high definition cameras and really good microphones and lighting, which you don't see being used on YouTube, hardly ever. You don't see lighting or audio. The audio is always bad on YouTube. It is a whole different experience. You want to watch it. I mean, I can just tell you how many YouTube videos I've watched like a tenth of the way through. Anybody else done that? You know, you start to watch a video and you're like, oh God, I'm going to waste time on this.
There's also
Yeah.
the teamwork
And
aspect.
there's
When
the
you do a TV
teamwork
show,
aspect.
You have to have more than 2
Absolutely.
or 3 people. generally.
Absolutely. We
Do
talk
it
a
one
lot
person.
about that in our youth programs, because, you know, some of the youth might have a camera, but when they come in and they work as a team, I mean, they understand so much differently when they come out of those programs. One of the things is respect for diversity. You know, you might like to be the host of the TV show. I might like to prefer to be on, behind the camera. Different personalities, different cultural backgrounds, different takes on things and perspectives means that you can work as a team and see everybody's strengths coming into play. And I think that's really important. Kids don't get that always in school or outside of school. And so that's another service that community television really provides, is that sense of teamwork. You're dead on with that. The other thing is that you're learning leadership. Kids and adults are learning leadership skills, are learning more about their community. They're getting invested in what's going on in the community. With our kids in our programs, just even calling an adult and scheduling an interview, some of them have never spoken to adults that way. It's a different feeling and a different sense of being a part of things that I think there's not a lot of time for in our culture. And community television and community media is a way to bring in some of that engagement on the community level. And sometimes people see a show and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know about that. And, you know, sometimes they see it on TV and sometimes they see a clip of it online.
And YouTube is an appointment, you know, you have to find it. If you find
Yeah.
a show that you like and you know, oh, next week at this same
You can
time,
subscribe.
I can come to it and
Yeah.
go to it, and you develop a relationship with the show and they develop a relationship with their followers, that's not quite the same thing as in YouTube. YouTube is
Very
more
true.
hit or miss, see it once,
Yeah.
you'll come back to it.
Yeah. Or somebody sends you a link.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very viral in that way. I think, you know, ultimately, good content rises to the top. You know, there's, I don't know if you guys, I'm trying to remember the name of the website, but I watched this really compelling video that my husband sent me. This is like one YouTube video I actually did watch, almost all of it. I only watched about 2/3 of it actually. But it was about the, this Stanford professor, maybe some of you have heard about this, who started offering open enrollment on the internet for free.
Wow.
And so he did this experiment, and he had 120,000 kids or students sign up, and they did this online program, and even the in-person students had better test scores than any other semester because there was more engagement. He set up a forum online where the best questions rose to the top by relevance of who was, you know, responding to it or answering it. The best content rose to the top. And so it was really interesting because it kind of evens the playing field. And it's a little bit that way,
Or
I think,
raises
with
it
the
up.
internet. Or raises it up, yeah. Yeah, it raises the standard, but it also allows this kind of open access. You know, which, you know, for me, from my background working at Cruz.io and then working in community media, it's really important to me that everybody has access to the same tools so that we can put our creative ideas and our opinions and our interest in our community out there to the world. Because that feedback that we get back is part of what makes it so much fun to live in community with each other. And also challenging too, but that's where the juicy stuff is for me.
Why don't you sell out the way PBS does, or has, and allow advertisers to support?
But we can do underwriting. We can do underwriting
I'm sorry? What's
we
the
can
answer?
do underwriting just like PBS does.
Yeah.
So, you know, this program was
I've not seen
underwritten
that.
by
They have
blah,
a
blah,
program
blah.
at Reddit where it's like basically,
In
this is
Santa
what you get
Cruz,
for
have I
so
seen
They
much
can
money.
do that in Santa Cruz as well. They do have some underwriting
Yeah.
people, yeah.
You get your
But
business
a lot of
mentioned.
foundations.
Grants, foundation, but you know it's challenging. I mean, we did great financially last year through grants. This year we're struggling. And the funders say, it's not you. We love your program. We wish we could support it. We lost money in the stock market. We are only giving to this one group this year. You know, you cannot run a nonprofit entirely on grants. So we've got to get creative, I think. I think we have to really think about ourselves a little bit more as a business with the systematic approach that we make to running a media center. I think we have to try to balance the need of keeping things open and accessible with the need of having systems in place that allow us to deliver those services as efficiently as possible. And that's really challenging.
Any question?
Thank you for all your service. My question is about something I find incredibly annoying, because we have a lot of 99% cohesion and call it advanced hive activity for cross-pollination in our great county. But there's at least one broadcaster on Friday afternoons that seems just smug, and I'm familiar with some stories from Brownwater Navy or Coast Guard who most people just would ignore with flex. And so there's all kinds of extra activity and these auxiliaries that we brought on target. My question, if you were going to try to blow Rebecca Costa's and MD show out of the water on Friday afternoons before it goes to C-SPAN and the beginning of the bad news Saturday mornings in Washington, D.C. on C-SPAN, since we don't have Novak and Prince of Darkness, Mansell, I guess, just falls in the White House, so it goes to Thomas Jefferson in the South Pole. So it's, I did it to her. Anyway, the
We
point
catch
I'm
you,
trying to
Griff.
get to is-
Get the point.
Yeah, I can only think
You're drifting.
which of the following three powder kegs do you think might make the biggest display of fireworks? The fact that Lockheed Martin has not once had a town hall about the community they had to evacuate after that monster fire that burned for weeks and weeks. This during a year when no one wants to look like Colorado Springs County. Or, issue number 2, what if all smart meters were declared forward-leaning by the people to be e-waste and flushed with extreme prejudice into the pipelines directly to City Hall's front lawn?
Well, then I
You
can
know-
quit my day job.
I can't
The
really
question
answer
is
the
on the
question.
table, sir. I'd love
And
to
the
hear
third one?
forward and
And the
backbenchers, retirees, vets, SEALs.
Yeah, let's all quit.
Special
And the third?
And complain to the proper
Third
government
point could
authority.
be the attempted closure of the county fair by these moron 1%ers. that
You know,
think they
let me
can
just
okay.
interrupt you for a second, because I think all of the questions that you're asking are good questions to ask, but I'm not the person to ask those questions, to answer those questions.
Well, anything you can say
What
would
you
be
should
obviously
do,
enlightening. Thank you.
what you should do is if you care about these issues, any issue, you should go put it on community television and go interview people in the community and get that content on the air. I mean, that's what community
Organize,
television
go
is
more.
for. And the more you can use it as a resource and share with other folks in the community that it's a valuable resource that you want to make sure continues to exist, I think that's the best you can do.
If I could have a footnote. Now or later.
Tell us, more specifically now, local community TV has a temporary director, and pretty soon Comcast, as I understand the rules and regulations, are going to say, the law is that local TV won't be able to pay any salaries with that money, right? It's only for equipment. So what do you suggest, or what do you predict is going to happen with anybody that's on salary, or with our local TV in general?
Well, you know,
I mean,
because.
that's a big change.
Yeah, that's a big change. It's a really big change. So we're under the same provision, which is that we're no longer able to spend our PEG fees, so just the fees that come specifically for PEG fees, on operating expenses. It's just going to make it really difficult for all of us. We are already operating under a state franchise, which means that we need to be moving all of our funding for operations to non-PEG fees, which we have been trying to do, and it's very difficult. It means, I mean, we've got to have staff that can run those trainings. We've got to have staff that can go out and cover events. Even if we are going to go out and do paid production work in the community, we still have to have staff that we can pay to go out and shoot those events or edit those videos or what have you. So we're looking for ways. Grants has been one way that we've been able to come up with. We raised about $150,000 last year in grants, so that enabled us to cover a lot of our operational costs. It doesn't allow us to cover all of our costs. We're also fortunate we get funds from the city that are, in the county, that are franchise fees. Those are not regulated under DIVCA, so we're able to spend those however we like. That is not the case in Santa Cruz. They are a little bit more constricted in how they can use the funds for community television than we are. That's one of the reasons why the leadership has talked about a merger, because then one organization can use capital fees for capital, and then we can pool our resources operationally. We could also have fewer staff, so we'd be able to keep a lot more people than if community television went away entirely. So that's, I think, one of the impetuses for having a shared kind of organizational structure, is try to deal with that reality that is a very real reality. And that's why 50 media centers around California have closed, because they don't have any operational funds at all. So who's going to turn the lights on? Who's going to make sure that the broadcast servers are programmed? I mean, that takes a lot of staff time to go through and schedule that. The other thing for us is that we're following the Denver open media model, and Denver has been very innovative. They lost all of their capital, all of their operating funds by the city in Denver. The city said, we're not going to give you any operational money anymore. We're only going to give you capital, and you're going to have to figure out how to raise your money for operations yourself, because the organization was very poorly run in the past, and their governance was not good. And so the city said, this is what we'll give you, but it's only capital, and you've got to figure out how to pay for the operations of this organization yourself. So what they did was they got really slim, you know, in terms of, they have one staff person that runs the entire station. And they have online open source tools, technology that's helped them automate running the station. So the programming is done by members. The checkout and reservations are all done online. People can check out and reserve their own equipment. They don't spend as much time scheduling, because the software does it all and puts people choose what block they think their program is in, and it puts them into the schedule automatically. They have fewer hours. They only do trainings that are paid. There's no free trainings. They charge a much higher membership fee. They charge a much higher hourly per use fee for members. But they're still alive. And they've been able to also do a lot of paid productions for nonprofits and things like that. So they've been, I think that was 2005, 2006 when the city said that. Whole new organization came in and took over. So it wasn't the legacy organization, it was a brand new organization that had a lot of innovation attached to how they saw their ability to manage these resources for the community and still allow a great deal of public access. So it seems like that's a very good balance. A lot of media centers don't feel like they're there yet because they haven't lost the funding yet. I think a lot of us, when we lose the funding, we're going to go straight to that model. Because what other options are there?
Have people pay what it costs. You know, I've done some things with community TV, and I was always kind of impressed, like, wow, they're doing all this for this?
Yeah.
Because it's been a gravy train. And, what's the metaphor?
But these
It's-
costs would
yeah.
be incredible, wouldn't they? I mean, once you start,
They've been being paid for before, they're not incredible. She said like in Denver, people pay for it if they have the intention and motivation and commitment.
And the fees are still way lower than if you went with a
Yeah.
commercial
Yeah,
production
you had to
company.
pay
I
for
mean,
it.
you know, what we would charge for a nonprofit production is about probably a fifth of what a commercial production company would charge. And when I got to CMAP, I raised the rates a little bit so that we could sort of incrementally start bringing in more funds. But you know, even still, our rates are very, very low cost, and that's affordable still for nonprofits and for the education community. You know, we do videos for the school districts. We do videos for government agencies. We do videos for campaigns. But they're still very, very low cost. But it helps us to cover the cost. We would have to probably jack up our rates a little bit if we had absolutely no operations funding coming in. And we have to be very hyper vigilant about going out there, and we really have to hustle now, whereas we didn't have to. And some stations, you know, I talk to my colleagues in Massachusetts. I always use Massachusetts as an example. They'll probably watch this and get a kick out of it. But you know, they'll tell me, oh yeah, we have a really small budget. And I said, really? How much is your budget? Oh, it's $500,000. I'm like, well, how many staff do you have? Oh, we have 3 staff. We're really small. And I said, you know, guys, I started with a $350,000 budget. Now this year we'll have $450,000. Next year we may be back to $350 again. We have about the same budget as you, a little bit less, and we have 9 people on staff, and we're doing this and this and this. They're like, how do you do all that? And I'm like, you know, you got to be scrappy. And you know, I'm from New England too. You'd think they'd be scrappy in Massachusetts, but they've been living off this fee that allows them to have a lot of resources. And I think what's going to be kind of neat in a way, I mean, it's going to be sad because we are going to lose community media centers, and I am not looking forward to that. My colleagues all across the country are doing some amazing work, and we will be much worse as a culture to not have the work of community television. But when that happens, when we lose our funding, there's going to be a lot of really interesting, innovative ways that some folks are going to hold on. And I hope that Santa Cruz is one of those communities.
We better be.
Boy, if it doesn't happen here, where the hell can it happen? Jeez.
Yeah.
This is such a vital, essential thing. We've got a producer that has a property here, Voices from the Village. Last night, commercial, Charlie. Last night, they had volunteers that put together the feeding program next door. And in that regard, it's going to bring more volunteers into the program. And it's essential to have that, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, I'm not being overly dramatic because this is our town reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is how we get action, because we find out what the problems are, thank you, Charlie, and then at that point, certain entity, that little organizations, I'm a secular humanist, and let me tell you, our little organization's a watchdog about making sure that we have a balance between our needs of our community and some religious beliefs. So anyway, Charlie, your program was brilliant last night, and we're not going to lose you.
Bravo.
That's all.
And for Bruce, he keeps our heads up on what's going on, and we can't lose him that way.
Somebody's gotta watch all those movies.
it's a dirty job. You have something relevant there? Way down there.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if you think it's a worthwhile hedge to make like a big push to start, investing resources into having a grassroots movement that would push for restoring public funding to community television. And then I'm also wondering if there's any notable content that's been generated basically about these issues that we've been discussing today, because it seems like sort of a natural thing that if community television wants to engage in self-preservation, you should probably do so through media and educating people.
Wow, that's great. That was very, very well said. One of the things I've tried to do on the national board is to produce content like that. I was a marketing director for Cruz IO, and I have a master's in marketing. My BA was in political science, but I studied marketing. Learned a lot from this guy actually on marketing. And one of the things that I realized is that you've got to tap into people's what's in here already. And there's so much marketing that we're exposed to that we don't even realize that we're kind of tuning into it, or that we get something because we've been fed that message over and over again. So I've been trying to use those memes for good. Instead of, selling a product, I've been trying to figure out what those memes are and use them for community television. So we did an Apple PC parody right before I left community television, that won a national award. And it was just a 1-minute piece. And, of course, the PC guy is the corporate media guy, and the Apple guy is the community television guy. And it's, it's very witty. Jeff Donnell, who some of you probably know, who did So What for years and worked for community television, is now down in LA. He is very funny. I have to give him all the credit for the funny parts, especially the part about corporate media doing, something about corporate media doing surveys and focus groups at NASCAR and Walmart's. Kind of funny. So some of the folks that are in other parts of the country just kind of don't laugh during that part. I'm always like, it's kind of more Santa Cruz joke, but I think those kinds of things are really critical for us to be doing our own messaging around that. We also did a Wayne's World parody. We had two guys at our station dress up as Wayne and Garth, and it's hilarious. I mean, Wayne and Garth are funny, and they're really funny. But it was why Wayne and Garth support community television. And it was like the top 5, they used to do their top 10s or whatever. So it was like the top 5 reasons. And, we threw in a few jokes and dirty jokes in there. And that seemed to get some eyeballs to it. But I think we're still struggling as a national movement for how do we do the level of public education that we need to do without the resources to do it, frankly.
I have a suggestion for
Spartan
one.
attitude.
All these people showing up in their bunny slippers and things to government meetings because they can no longer watch it on community
There you go.
television.
I love it.
I think that would get a little attention.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think part of it is that we need to be recognized for the pivotal community anchor institution that we are. Because we're not just a place for cable channels anymore. I think we really need to focus a lot of the messaging around the fact that, look, we're bringing together, we're kind of the convergence of community and the digital world. We're bringing together all these nonprofits. We're bringing together the libraries. We're working to help local communities have broadband access through the iNets that some of us are able to provide. We're building a workforce that has real 21st century skills and critical thinking skills, which isn't happening anywhere else in our communities. And I think the more that we can focus on that message and honestly let go a little bit of being so attached to us being on cable. I think we've got to really focus on, look, it's what we're doing at our media centers that matters, and the product of that is that we have cable channels and that we're putting our content online. But what's happening at these media centers is really important. There's a media literacy part of it that's really important that people aren't getting any other way. And a civic engagement, that's happening because of the result of that work. So I don't know if that answers. I mean, that's really what I'm trying to do that. I think some of my other colleagues are also trying to do that. I think we could do better as a national movement, but frankly, trying to move policy forward, trying to keep the members of the National Alliance for Community Media moving forward as professionals, having conferences every year on a $400,000 budget, it's not really enough money on a national level to really fund a movement. I mean, we've got to do grassroots advocacy work, and we can't do that. We need a couple of staff going around to all these places in the country, and we don't have those staff.
You need your own Koch brothers.
Yeah, right.
We do need some celebrities. Yeah, I've been thinking about asking Mike Myers, actually. I don't know if he'd email me back, but...
2 announcements. Well, this is interrupting you.
Is it a question? Is it?
No, I have 2 public
Questions first,
service.
announcement second.
All right, if you have something relevant?
Relevant to an enormous audience, probably the biggest iceberg under the national media horizon here in Santa Cruz County, I'd say would be foreclosures. You had a great foreclosure story. We have an enormous amount of local effort involved in foreclosure. That's probably one of the biggest calving of iceberg events I'd like to see. That and the fact that we have amazing salmon infrastructure. Up
You have a
in Mill
question?
Creek. Without taking too long by Victorian and Herculean standards, what seems most relevant to you about foreclosures now with incumbents under the illusion that they're going to be allowed to?
You know, that's not really my area of expertise, but I think that having community television talk about the issues of what happened during the bank crisis, I think is a really important conversation. There's some great documentaries like Inside Job and some other documentaries out there that discuss this issue, and we certainly would.
One of the best things that community television did was that there was a consortium that was put together by Bill Monning, Sam Farr. That was that they were done with on the short sale and foreclosure issues
Great.
that they happened about quarterly, but they filmed them. And a lot of people are too embarrassed to show up at something like that, but it did a huge amount of education and got people to sort of reach out and start to deal with it before it absolutely annihilated them. It was one of the best things you guys have done in the last few years.
Well, I applaud the folks at community television for doing that work, because I think, you know, the folks at CTV here are very aware of what's going in the community and are very much, especially, you know, my good friend Peter McGettigan, you know, who covers hours. You know, you all probably see him at events, but what you don't know is that most of the time he's covering it for free. You know, he is a paid contractor and goes out and covers some things, but it's his interest in being involved in the community. He, like others, it's their interest in being involved in the community that has made them want to go out and cover these community events. Folks like Charlie, who are doing their own show and covering events and educating the community. I mean, there's hundreds of people like that in this community and in other communities who are really the fabric of community television, who are covering things like that. And if we didn't have the capacity to support our members at community television stations, we would lose that ability to cover those really critical community events.
I think that program saved a couple of lives.
Wouldn't be
Peter
surprised.
does really good stuff.
Anybody else?
I want to add, I have seen fantastic programs on community television, okay? Some presently here, but both local, and the other night I stayed up until 3 in the morning to watch What a Way to Go. What a Way to Go. If you haven't seen it, you get splendid reality about the ecological future of the planet.
There is
Unless
none.
we make changes. There cannot be. Just extraordinary. And there's no other venue where you would see a film as candid about the poisoning of a planet, the oil companies, for example. Merits it, which brings me back to the critical need and the contributions of that forum, those 3 channels here in Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
But I remain just aghast that since the Act of '84 you make reference to, that friends in Congress haven't had some. How long has the CAP Act been before the Congress,
Just
or its predecessor?
2 or 3 years now.
Okay, so well.
It's been a very difficult 2 or 3 years in Congress trying to get issues that, frankly, I mean, I think our issues are really important, but there's a lot of issues that have been very important to get through Congress, and I would have gladly taken a back seat to some of those. That have been, it's been a very difficult partisan. I mean, when you talk to people who are in Congress, they will tell you that it has been so charged there and so partisan that they haven't been able to move things forward. And I'm not saying they shouldn't. They should
But
be
the
moving
Democrats
things
had a
forward.
majority, okay, prior to 2010. All right, and frankly, I do know how it works there. And what could have happened. Somehow you guys have been let down by people who extend sympathy to you. And I must add also, I've watched Mr. Farr be totally ineffective in the US Congress, personally. So I don't think you're gonna get that.
number of bridges
The
too
fact that
far.
he hasn't even got it, enough said, I'm not gonna elaborate further,
Yeah.
we talked
Okay.
afterwards. But you really should, it's really sad
It
that you
is.
haven't got a collaboration or a group in the Congress to say, this is the reality about the importance of community interactive television.
You know, we've made a lot of progress though, and I'm really happy to say that I've been on the national board for the last 3 years. I've been going to DC every year and going and lobbying those halls and talking to folks.
Banquet.
And I actually feel like we've been fortunate to be able to move forward things as we have. We, in the beginning, only had a few sponsors, co-sponsors, who would sign on to that bill. They wouldn't even sign on to it. And this last year in Congress, we have quite a few more. So I think we are getting somewhere. I don't know if that's necessarily gonna get us to the end that we want, and I wish it would. But I think there's a lot of other advocacy things. Just let me finish here for a moment. There's a lot of other advocacy things that I think we could be doing. We may not need to wait, we may not want to wait for Congress if they're not doing something. I think we're a democracy, we can do things ourselves, and if we can get out the word about, what's happening in our communities and how the cable companies are really holding us
Screwing us,
hostage in our own
stealing.
communities.
Okay, let's wrap it up. Paula, a couple quick announcements,
Quick, Shakespeare Santa Cruz tomorrow night, opening with Man in the Iron Mask, a remake of a better way. And the cheaper seats that you're ever going to get for Shakespeare Santa Cruz are the previews. The directors come out, everybody in the cast comes out, you get to talk to them. I recommend it. The next 3 nights this week are going to give us that opportunity. Next issue is Medea Benjamin. She's one of the most progressive women that we could vote for, but we don't get enough people behind her. And that's at the Bookshop Santa Cruz tomorrow night, 7:30. Thank you.
Is it tonight?
Thank you very much, Kathy Bisbee. Yes.